to Japan now and talk about this particular issue that's plaguing the country. The number of babies born annually there has fallen below 700,000. This is for the first time since records began in 1899. Now, this decline is faster than demographers were predicting even a few years ago. The slow birth rate is already leading to a dramatic fall in the population, with implications, of course, for future economic growth. Well, Professor of Politics Tom Lee says work-life balance is a key factor.
This has been a trend that's been identified by the government since the 1980s, but I think we see the more profound effects in the last decade or so. There's multiple reasons that go into it, but I think the primary ones are twofold. One, it's economic, that Japan has experienced economic stagnation for a couple of decades now, and the cost of having children and rearing them is quite high, yet wages and lifestyles haven't kept up. Relatedly, I would say it's the work-life balance that makes it very difficult for families to make the decision, not really to have one child, but to have two children, which is what's needed for replacement level numbers that a country needs.
I'm presuming there's also concern about what's going to happen with the aging population. Who's going to look after them?
Yes, the aging so it's a sometimes called a demographic crisis because it's multiple things going on at once. When you have an aging population, that also means that you have entitlements, and Japan is a strong social welfare state. So that means the working class has to take care of the elderly class, also the children, and then also themselves as well. With stagnant wages and difficult work-life balances, that's hard to do. And I would like to emphasize this burden is disproportionately applied to women, who traditionally are the ones that are expected to take care of children and their parents, and generally their spouse's parents as well.
Just on that point, I know that Prime Minister Shigeru Ishiba has described the situation here as a silent emergency. Is he looking at ways perhaps to entice couples to have more children, perhaps to provide more support for women in particular?
Yes, he is, and he wouldn't be the first one, since this is a problem that's been identified for a couple decades now. And so he's passed measures or proposed measures that would help with childcare expenses, subsidies for having children, things like that. But I think the framing is ultimately that you point to shows how difficult a problem it is, because having a child, at the macro level, we could see how it affects states. You need a certain amount of people for tax dollars and for defense and things like that. But the decision itself is very personal. So you're going to have a state level policy with entitlements or subsidies. And at the same time, why people choose to have a child is really dependent on their personal situation. And that's why we see the demographics crisis is not equally applied across prefectures. Some prefectures have higher birth rates than others, which shows that you need a more tailored policy.
Now, we also know that the country has had a very stringent immigration policy over the last few decades or so. I wonder if now they're having to perhaps relax immigration rules, in order to bolster a shrinking population.
Yes, immigration is normally seen as kind of the quick fix because you could take on people of age that can have children. So in 2024, Japan hit a record at 3.8 million immigrants, which is about 3% of the population. And this is a 10% growth from the year before. So it's a big deal. But that's just the first part. Some studies show that immigrants actually have fewer children than native-born Japanese, right? The reason for that are multifold, because they tend to make lower wages. The assimilation into a country is difficult. They have to navigate the different language, different school systems. So we shouldn't expect the immigration issue to solve the fertility crisis right away, but it can address labor shortages.
Listen, we know that it isn't just in Japan. This issue is also affecting other developing Asian economies. We're thinking about perhaps South Korea, China, Vietnam, Singapore in particular as well. I wonder if this points to a larger picture, maybe a breakdown in traditional Asian values of family and filial piety.
I think it's a broader issue beyond Asia. If we look at countries around the world, there's only around 60, 70 countries or so that are at replacement level. So it's not just on Asia. But I do think culture does matter. But I would say that the economy in general in the world has evolved much faster than cultural practices. So for example, if you have to work so much overtime or you have so much labor that you have to give, yet the salaries stay stagnant and the average age of marriage is now 30.8. for women in the country, that means you're having your first and second child at a later time, which means even if you have traditional family values and you have your grandparents around to help take care of the kids, your grandparents are older as well. So their ability to do a lot of the traditional, 3-generation labor to, find this balance is being disrupted as well. So that's what I mean where the economy evolved much faster than cultural practices. And now states are trying to catch up by coming up with incentives to entice people to have children. But that statement is strange, right? If to say that the state needs people to have kids, so you have more taxpayers, more labor, and more, say, defense force members. That's just a really hard sell.
It certainly is. A very interesting topic indeed. Tom Lee, Associate Professor of Politics at Pomona College. We thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you.